Okay, awesome. Well, welcome everybody to the our chapter meeting for March. And we have a few announcements to start with, and then we're going to get on to the main feature of the presentation a little bit later. But let me just share my screen here. Great. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, great. So I just wanted to make a
Paul,
few announcements. Yep.
actually, you're not full screen. We're seeing the background.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for that.
There
Oh,
we go.
is that better? Great.
It's a
All
little
right. Well,
bit.
welcome everyone. I just wanted to make a few announcements before we get on to the main event. And the first of which is to announce the topic for our April chapter event, which will be a forest bathing in Central Park. This is awesome. I don't know if any of you have, or if all of you have ever experienced a forest bathing, but I've done it up in the New York Botanical Garden, and it's really super. And it's a way that you just get in touch with nature. And we think that this is going to be a great kind of counterpoint to all of the advocacy work that a lot of us are doing, in that we'll be able to enjoy the nature that we're all fighting for. And so that's really exciting. And it's going to be led by our leader, Lori Clamner, and she's a guide with the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Guides. So she's qualified and she's really excited. Um, we've been in contact, and so this is great. So that'll be on April 26th at that should say 6 to 7:30. I apologize for that. That's a typo. We'll be meeting at 6 near the Tavern on the Green. And we'll send out all the details shortly. I've gotten the details from Lori, and so we'll send those out in just a few days. The second announcement is that we relaunched our website. I'm announcing this for the second month in a row for any new members, but there's loads of useful information and calendar events, and all the recordings are past events on the website. So if someone who's a co-host could just drop into the chat or I'll do it after this. And then the second to last piece is that the New York State Coalition has 5 working groups that are very active on advocacy, education, presentations, social media, and written communications. So if you want to get involved with any of those groups, they're led at the state coalition level, and it's great because you get a chance to meet with some of the 2,000 members from across the state. You can find that information also at our website under the Take Action tab. And then just a quick announcement is that Bill McKibben, who is a hero for many of us, is going to be speaking on the climate movement at the Climate Museum, who's a partner of ours. And that will be on Saturday, April 15th from 3 to 4:30. It's downtown at the Climate Museum pop-up. And that link there is how you register for the event. So those are the announcements for this month. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Beth Heroes, who's going to take us through this page.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. So I hope those of you who are on this call saw the survey that we sent out to members a little earlier this year. Thank you if you participated. If you still want to participate, that's totally fine. And I just put the link in as I was getting on here, so you'll see that in the chat. But we just wanted to share, it was a very brief survey, so we just wanted to share a very short summary of what we saw. And in a way, nothing too shocking because we do get good feedback. But basically, the overarching theme is that most of our members want to see the social networking events. They want to have these types of informational meetings. And it seems that most of our members, when you break it down a little bit further, are interested in advocating for policy change. So very, very good. And then what broke the 50% mark is volunteer opportunities. So we're looking at your feedback and we are making plans for the rest of the year based on that. So as Paul just said, there is going to be a social event coming up in April. The informational meetings, of course, as we continue our chapter meetings, Hopefully you find those really informative or interesting. And, we are very active right now working with Renewable Heat Now. So looking for some policy changes, which is great. So I also just wanted to say that if you still do want to participate in the survey, or even if you have new ideas, feel free to fill that out again, because people gave us suggestions. So you see in the bottom right of this slide, just a few of the suggestions that seem to pop up: waste management, legislation, education. So we're going to try to focus some topics for chapter meetings there. And then just as a point of interest, the 2022 favorite chapter meeting was Heed the Cry, Electrify, which I think kind of spoke to everyone in their personal, spaces. So that was great. So that's it. Feel free to jump in, fill out more information if you want to, but that's our little report. So thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Beth. And with that, Faith, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Paul, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our Youth Voices chapter meeting tonight. We have some really amazing and powerful young activists with us, so we're excited to hear from each of them. And so I'm going to start by telling you all a little bit about Lucy Troy. So Lucy is a freshman at Cornell University's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, studying environment and sustainability. Her passion for sustainability began in high school when she co-founded the first virtual climate summit, the Bronx Youth Climate Summit. This led her to become a board member of the international climate nonprofit Youth Climate Action Team. And as their first global affairs director, she advised climate activists around the world as they worked on the establishment of regional branches outside the US, effectively establishing their international presence. And last summer, she interned with Hoja Nueva, a conservation nonprofit based in the Peruvian Amazon, where she conducted various projects ranging from amphibian species research to the analysis of animal scat remains. So thanks so much for joining, Lucy, and I will pass it on to you to talk a little bit about what you're working on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Faith. It's great to be back here with Climate Reality Project. Hopefully you can all see the slide that I'm sharing. So yes, once again, my name is Lucy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a current freshman at Cornell University in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. I am currently pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Environment and Sustainability. And the best way to describe the major is that it is an interdisciplinary look at our Earth systems, at the climate crisis, and at everything having to do with environmental issues, both at a community level and a global level. I'm currently on the track towards concentrating in sustainable business. So a lot of my studies in academia coincide with both sustainability and more of the business side, economics, looking at startups and entrepreneurship. But so far, my education has tended to be more well-rounded as I'm just getting started. So I wanted to give you guys an idea of the sorts of classes that I've been able to take here just within my first 2 semesters. One of them is a class on global water sustainability, which has been super interesting, just talking about all different perspectives on water conservation and freshwater biodiversity and protecting our marine ecosystems. I'm also in a colloquium titled Perspectives on the Climate Change Challenge. So every week we have a guest speaker who is an expert in their field come and talk about a different topic related to the climate, whether that be climate mapping, climate solutions, climate justice. We've had a broad range of speakers, all of whom have been extremely informative. I also take functional plant biology and have taken a class called Writing About Science, which has to do with writing about engaging narratives and prose having to do with biology, health, society, everything related to the scientific field. So I've been loving my classes and I've been loving my academics, but one of the most rewarding components of my experience at Cornell so far has definitely been my work outside of the classroom. So recently I joined Cornell's Food Systems and Global Change team, which is a relatively new team housed in Cornell's Global Development Department, working on refining, reforming, and researching about the food systems of the future. I currently work as a science communications intern, so just developing strategies for content, messaging, how best to brand our work, especially as we are some of the primary contributors to the Lancet project, which is one of the most heavily cited papers on creating a global sustainable diet within the constraints of our environment. Another activity I participate in is the Cornell Hydroponics Club, which is a totally student-led, student-run club focused on growing plants, mainly leafy greens, some peppers, hydroponically in Cornell's greenhouses. So Cornell has a wide array of greenhouses in addition to a vast amount of fields for farming, as Ithaca is a rich agricultural community. But just within the hydroponics club, we focus on growing and harvesting our own plants to donate to Annabelle's Grocery, which is a grocery store here on campus that locally sources all of its produce. And the final experience I wanted to highlight is the Einaudi Center for Global Change, which is also within the Global Development Department. And this is actually an upcoming project for me. I will be an intern for them this summer with one of their partner organizations called Yakum, which is based in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And I'll be conducting some plant research there on beneficial plant species that we may want to consider prioritizing as we work towards reforestation and working with indigenous communities in the Amazon. So I sort of just wanted to segue to just sort of the biggest hot topics in climate that have been on my mind ever since coming to Cornell, and really what I've spent a lot of my time thinking about through my classes and extracurriculars. The first would definitely be sustainable aquaculture. This is something that we touched on a lot in my global water sustainability class. For those of you who don't know, aquaculture is the culturing of aquatic organisms. So it's basically just creating fish, creating marine organisms that we would normally just find in the wild. And while it can have some potentially harmful effects, if done sustainably, it can also create a lot of environmental benefits within and beyond food production. So contributing to food security and contributing to conservation of marine ecosystems. The next is the idea of the carbon triangle, which refers to land, cement, and steel, which accounts for about 14% of all carbon emissions. And something really interesting that I learned about in my climate change colloquium is that China is accounting for about 7%, which is half of all of these emissions, a lot of which goes towards the real estate sector and building new housing, which is actually largely vacant. Not a lot of people are living in these houses, and there's a lot of emissions going into producing this housing. So speaking about how to reduce our carbon by simply halting the construction of unnecessary real estate. Another point that I've been thinking a lot about is converging climate justice and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and really seeing more of a presence and urgency towards addressing environmental racism within those goals, especially through the lens of education and uplifting youth and communities who are most impacted by these surmounting issues of environmental injustice. Second, next would be virtual water use, which just refers to our indirect water use. So, water goes into basically everything we do and everything we use, our transportation, our clothing, our food. And I've recently realized after, really taking a deep look at my water footprint, how much water I am using that is not just being directly consumed. So, getting to be more mindful about what it is we're really consuming when it comes to water. Second to last would be land grant universities and climate solutions. So Cornell is a land grant university, and something else that was talked to me about was how the land grant system has been successfully executing transdisciplinary research, but also how it can better leverage its funding towards creating climate solutions across land grant institutions. And finally, and this has sort of just been a constant interest of mine since high school, but which has only continued to develop since coming here, is definitely sustainable urban agriculture. Obviously, I'm currently based somewhere rural, but I have thought a lot about how I can take what I've been learning about indoor aquaculture and fishery management and, everything having to do with the carbon triangle and climate justice, to think back to my work in the city that applied more to integrating sustainable agriculture in an urban setting. So yeah, those are just some of the hot topics on my mind as of lately, but I've really been enjoying this past academic year, and thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Such interesting things that you're kind of learning and taking on. So I appreciate you sharing that. And next, I would like to introduce everyone to Sydney Kroonen. Sydney is a 17-year-old climate activist and artist from San Diego, California. She's the founder and co-president of her school's climate coalition, the Green Team, and an action team lead for Action for the Climate Emergency. In these roles, she has organized climate strikes at her school and collaborated with the administration to push for a transition to renewable energy. She also collaborates with San Diego 350 as a member of Youth versus Oil, a youth-led campaign against oil drilling based in San Diego. So welcome, Sydney, and thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to take a second to share my screen. So, hi everyone. Again, I'm Sydney Kroonen. I'm a youth activist and also a creative, and I'm based in San Diego, California. So, to get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got into climate work. So when I think about my climate activism journey, it started around 7th grade when Greta Thunberg started kind of going viral on social media, so to speak. I had just gotten social media, so it was the first intersection of a media platform and activism that I had really experienced or been a part of. And I was really compelled by everything she had to say. And that kind of launched me into this path towards climate activism. But initially that kind of took form as just really intense feelings of climate anxiety. And being that my school didn't talk a lot about the climate crisis in its curriculum, and it wasn't really something that people my age were talking about, I felt very alone in this feeling because I didn't see it anywhere other than social media. So that was definitely not the easiest part of my journey, but eventually I was able to find a real sense of community in my friend Ryan, who's also on this call, and in the members of Youth v. Oil, and being able to talk about these feelings and also concentrate them into something productive. And that kind of leads me into talking about the work that I do. So when I think about my climate activism work, it's kind of split into two different fields. The first of which would be the Green Team, which is the club at my school. So I founded that in my sophomore year. And since then, Ryan has joined, and she's now my co-president. And together we take on small projects and larger projects, some of which we're organizing school strikes, but we've also been able to collaborate with administration to make the switch at our school to renewable energy. And through our mentorship from ACE, which is a national organization that works with local youth environmental movements to kind of provide educational resources and also advice and guidance, They referred us to Vogue in fall of 2022 to be a part of the mini climate summit that was also the digital cover for the January 2023 issue. Unfortunately, I was not able to be a part of that because I got COVID on the day of the shoot, which was a big heartbreak, but it was a great opportunity to be introduced to a lot of really incredible older climate activists that are doing really great work. And since then, we worked on video campaigns, trying to push for the governor of California to declare a climate emergency via executive order. And then also we recently got a grant to curate an environmental art exhibition in our community with student art, which Ryan is going to talk a little bit about later. And then I also work with Youth v. Oil, which is a local campaign in San Diego with students from all over the county. And the goal of the campaign is to phase out oil drilling. And we have passed a resolution in San Diego County schools and in the county as a whole, which has been super exciting. And currently, as a part of that campaign, I'm working in 2 leadership roles, the first of which is I'm leading the promotion team for an upcoming climate summit, which is going to be an educational event for youth from San Diego County. And also I'm shadowing our current volunteer coordinator, and I'm going to be taking over that role come summer. So thank you so much. And I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Thanks so much, Sydney. Appreciate it. And you're working on so many amazing things. So thank you for sharing. So lastly, I'm going to introduce you all to Ryan. So Ryan is a climate activist and high school student from San Diego, California. She's the co-president of her school's Eco Club, the Green Team, and the media team lead for San Diego 350's Youth versus Oil, which is a youth-led campaign to end oil drilling in San Diego that Sydney just talked a bit about. She focuses her energy on organizing her peers into action through community building and creative endeavors. Ryan wants to influence the narrative around environmentalism to focus on social responsibility and action. She's also a nationally competitive synchronized skater and coach at her local ice rink. She was featured with musician Billie Eilish and other youth climate activists in the January 2023 digital cover of Vogue magazine. So welcome, Ryan, and thank you for chatting with us.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Let me see. I'm trying to share my screen right now. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So, hi, my name is Ryan Berberet. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm a junior at Francis Parker in San Diego, along with Sydney. And I'm here to tell you guys a little bit about how I became an activist. So my story starts with my parents. They were both heavily involved in activism by being union organizers or fostering on-house queer youth and working for our local San Diego LGBT community center. So they've installed values in me that have continued into my environmentalism work and taught me to spot injustice. And then when I was, ninth grade, I discovered that BP coined the term carbon footprint as a form of greenwashing and to blame the consumer. And that, I guess, it just made me really mad that they were lying to us in such an egregious and pervasive way. So I used that anger and turned it into motivation for action. I wrote a paper, you can see on the bottom, about it, and then did an art piece. My art has definitely gotten a lot better since ninth grade, but it's like about greenwashing. And then this tweet by Shell also was really key because just the irony there I thought was so unmatched. So more recently, my activism has definitely evolved a lot, but through Green Team, I'm able to make an impact within my school community along with Sydney by speaking at school strikes and then also creating educational material for our peers. We held a workshop where students took the role of community members and toxic waste company in a fake simulation of a city council meeting where they got to learn the basics of environmental justice and how to mobilize the community I'm also working with our 5th grade teachers at my school to kind of revamp their climate curriculum, since right now it's so focused on recycling and plastic, which is a very important issue. But I think it's also important that kids understand the root causes of it and how it affects people around them. Outside of school, I've been able to, with Youth for Climate and Youth the Oil, where I'm the media team lead / intern for, I'm able to run meetings, create social media and informational content, and help out with press releases. Also, by participating in different protests and demonstrations, I have a couple pictures here from our most recent one, which was on March 3rd, where we did a demonstration of a fake oil spill to kind of show the threat oil poses to our future, and to get big oil to stop investing in or to get people to stop investing in big oil. Also, as Cindy mentioned earlier, we just got a grant to curate a climate art gallery. This would be really cool because we'd spotlight youth artists and have them be able to show the juxtaposition of our fear for the future and our hope, because we need to be optimistic and we need to have that relentless hope for a future if we want to continue to live. At the same time, through social media, we're constantly getting this climate doomism. And then also I was featured in the Vogue January 2023's digital cover. So that was also an amazing way for me to get to meet other activists and just be able to fully immerse myself within the environmental justice space. What I really want to do out of my work is influence my peers' opinions, because right now they might just be high schoolers, but one day they're going to be the future CEOs, politicians, artists, athletes, etc. And if I can get them to change their thinking even just a little bit right now during this critically important part in their development, then I hope that when they do their future careers, they can take it into consideration and kind of implement it in whatever work they choose to do. Let's see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciated that, and appreciate you sharing these incredible images as well. So wanted to, ask you all some questions next. And the first thing I'd love to hear from you all is how you're balancing your activism with your schoolwork. It's been a while since I've been in high school and college, but the workload I know is definitely heavy. And I guess I'll start with you, Lucy, because I'm sure it's different when you're actually studying, what you're also, passionate about in terms of your activism. So how do you kind of balance it all with what's on your plate?
Yeah, so I've actually found that since coming to college, the balance has gotten to be a lot easier. So Sydney and Ryan, I remember what it was like to be in your guys' shoes. It is definitely not easy, especially because when you're a high schooler, you do not have the opportunities paved for you. You really have to create them for yourself, especially within the environmental space. But luckily, and I can only really speak for Cornell as an institution, but there are a huge multitude of environmental opportunities that were not accessible to me back in high school. So I find that a lot of my extracurriculars fit really nicely into some of my classes, but also just the work environment is much more conducive towards me being able to invest more and more efficiently into my climate work. So I would definitely say that I'm not doing as much self-driven work as I was in the past, and it's not as free form and abstract as it used to be. It's definitely more structured through some existing programs and channels that are now available for me to tap into. But it is certainly a little bit of a load off in a lot of ways.
Thanks, Lucy. Sydney, what about you? How are you finding that balance between, your schoolwork and your activism?
Yeah, so, well, first, it's great to hear from Lucy that it gets a little bit easier in college, because I know that it is rather difficult right now. But something that I at least try to prioritize is making sure that I build time to take care of myself and just be a human being into my schedule, because in order to make time for all the meetings that we have with Youth v Oil and San Diego 350, and also get all my homework done, and with that, and I'm also a competitive athlete, so have practice on top of that, it requires a very packed weekday schedule. So it's been really important to make sure that I build time to recover into my weekends so that I can kind of keep up that high pace schedule on the weekdays. So, and sometimes that requires a lot of making schedules for myself to keep myself on track, and also setting boundaries when necessary and learning how to say no, because I am the kind of person that always wants to say yes and always wants to help out wherever possible. But at some point, there's only so many hours in the day, and I need to recognize that being human is like another extracurricular. And if anything, it would be a more time-intensive extracurricular, because there's, at a certain point, there's just not enough time for everything that we want to do. So it's a struggle, but we make it work. So.
Yeah, you definitely make it work. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely have a similar experience as to Sydney. I think for me, it's like I have the three spheres of my life. I have my school, my environmental action, and then my sports. And having to choose between those sometimes can be really difficult. And because I don't want to choose, I want to do all of them, especially when it comes to, do I do this math homework, or should I spend time like doing this thing which will help guarantee I have a future? So having that balance is really difficult, especially when with everything that's going on at school, there's often not really a space to talk about it other than with Green Team. It's not really built into most of our core classes. So much of that is separated. I have to I will take into consideration whatever class I'm doing, how it relates to the climate crisis, to kind of, I guess, keep myself more in touch with how my academics are intertwined with my environmentalism.
Awesome, thank you. And we have a great question from Maura, just about kind of climate doomism, which I think, definitely we've been kind of looking to your generation more too, because I think you've been open about speaking about it and have made, everyone, regardless of their age, feel more comfortable talking about climate anxiety and the things they're feeling. So just would love to hear from you all about, anything. Well, first, I'd love to hear from you all more about how you're kind of feeling about that, and like how you're, perhaps, staying optimistic, even though you're having those kind of anxious thoughts. And, if there's anything that, you feel like, generations who are older than you can kind of do to kind of help mitigate those feelings. So I'll start with you, Sydney.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess hearing the question, the first thing that came to mind for me was actually a memory of when I was in 7th grade one day in science class. Our teacher showed us this video, and it was the world, I think it was 5 degrees warmer. It was a documentary. And I remember our teacher she repeatedly paused the documentary throughout the class period, and it was all of these images of a burning earth. There was fire everywhere. It looked like a dystopia. And she would pause the video and she would look at us and say, this is going to be the world that your grandchildren live in. This is going to be the world that the next generations after you are going to inherit. And as a 13-year-old, that was kind of terrifying. So I think when we're teaching about the climate crisis, we teach about it through a very positive lens, saying this is a challenge, but this is a challenge that we're going to overcome. That's going to be really important in kind of shifting the narrative, because if we're telling people that a burning earth is the fate of our planet, then it kind of feels like, oh, well, then why would we do the work in the first place if it's just going to happen? So just making sure that we introduce it in a way that doesn't say what is going to happen as fact, because we don't know what's going to happen. So
That's so true. Lucy, like, what are your thoughts on that? Especially as you are kind of interacting with, different professors, and I'm sure people of a lot of different ages kind of at Cornell.
Right. So I definitely can empathize with everything Sydney said. And I think that the way the climate crisis has been communicated to youth by older generations has been largely ineffective and very discouraging. And climate anxiety is a very real thing. When I was a senior in high school, I did a culminating independent study on climate anxiety, just to look at how prevalent it was at my school and among the students in my high school. And it's, very prevalent. It's very heavily driven by the way climate change is taught within our science curriculums. And I think that, seeing the contrast between now being in a very action-oriented environment and on the front lines with some of the greatest change makers in the climate sphere, the issue that I found to be is we talk a lot about the problems, but never the solutions. And something that's really funny to me sometimes that happens here is I'll tell people my major, I'll tell people I'm majoring in environment sustainability. And the response a lot of times is, wow, like, that's amazing. You're so selfless. That's, really incredible. I mean, I'm just doing like econ, I'm just doing psychology, I'm just doing this, I'm just doing that. But I have never thought of it through that lens, because when I think of the future, I think of every job, every career field as being intertwined with sustainability, with the movement towards greening our planet. So I think a big part of the issues is that we are not educating our youth and upcoming generations with the idea that all sectors are going to have to intersect with sustainability in some way, shape, or form if we're going to save our planet. And I, optimistically believe that we are making a shift towards that. But there, I think, is a very strong pressure to do that. And also to make sure that people my age don't lose hope, because although we don't have complete jurisdiction or control over what, big oil is doing and what these huge emitters on a federal and, conglomerate level are doing, it is still important that we are incentivized to vote and we are incentivized to invest correctly. So yeah, I'd say doomism is not the way to go for sure.
Yeah, not at all. We try not to traffic in that here either. And Ryan, I'd love to just hear your thoughts as well, just on kind of climate anxiety and how, we can kind of do better when it comes to talking about it.
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing is action. Whenever I have those thoughts of like what's going to happen, and whenever I get that kind of eco anxiety building, what I do is turn that into action. Whatever it's doing, just writing emails or whatever is on my current agenda, I think that's the most important thing to combat that is get people to turn that kind of fear that builds in your chest whenever you think of the climate crisis and use that as motivation to kind of achieve this general goal of avoiding the doomism. I also think, well, I remember this was recently, a week or two ago, when the people were talking a lot about the Willow Project, which they still are. But one of my friends said, like, when they were talking about their AP art portfolio, that they're not going to finish it in time, they were like, well, it doesn't matter if Project Willow gets passed because my future won't matter anyway. And it's just like, those are the thoughts that we want to avoid, because there's no choice. I don't want to live in a world where I can't enjoy the things that I want to do. So I spend so much of my time ensuring that I'm able to do those in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. And next, I'd love to just hear about how you're taking care of yourself. Paul asked a question about that too, because activists are giving their all, and their lives are getting busier, the world is getting busier, so it can kind of take a lot out of you. And I know you all are kind of doing lots of different things, so I'd love to hear from you first, Ryan, because I know you mentioned sports as well. Like, how are you kind of making sure that you kind of recharge with all that you have going on?
Yeah, I mean, sleep's a big component of it, getting enough of it, but also I think something really important for me is just self-reflection, whether it's just at the end of the day or at the end of the project, being able to analyze what did I do? Is there something to improve on? And because my goal is to always become a better activist and just become a better person in general in all of the various fields I'm in. So being able to analyze that is really critical for me to prevent more just worrying and stress and kind of busy work without a goal.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What about you, Sydney? How are you kind of taking care of yourself with all the things that you have going on in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of reiterating what Ryan said, I think sleep is definitely a big one, making it a priority. But also, one thing I've been trying to do recently is to make sure or hold myself accountable to finding time to be social and be a teenager and be with my friends on weekends, at least once every weekend, just because in the past I've had a tendency to just kind of isolate and get all my work done when I get really stressed, which, I mean, it makes everything happen, but it's not a great way to take care of myself because that's a really great recipe for burnout. So making sure that that's something that I'm making a priority in my schedule so that it happens more often, because I think, kind of like I said earlier, it's important to remember that one of the extracurriculars that we do is being a human, and that's something that's really important to learn to excel at if we want to be able to succeed in our other aspects of work, because we're a lot more productive when we're happier overall. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And Lucy, what about you? I don't remember sleeping that much in college, but how are you taking care of yourself?
I would definitely say just getting to spend time outside in nature is the best way to rejuvenate and rebuild hope, especially if I'm feeling a little pessimistic about the current climate situation. I used to really not have an outdoors to just go and hang out in back in the city. So it's a big shift being able to actually appreciate the nature that I've spent so many years trying to conserve and advocate for. And now having it at my fingertips it's really gratifying. And I'd say another component of that is getting to do the actual field work. So I talked about how I went to Peru last summer and how I'm going to Ecuador this summer. And there are obviously on the ground experiences working towards conservation and preventing a lot of the issues that have come to a head in the Amazon, but getting to actually be on the ground and seeing what is it that we're protecting, what is the true cost here? Like, these are the animals that we're trying to save. These are the plant species that we're trying to preserve is very energizing in a lot of ways and very meditative as well.
Thank you, Lucy. Maura had a question and wanted to ask about the demonstration that you did, Ryan, where you were kind of simulating an oil spill. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what that was like?
Yeah, so on March 3rd, we took part in the Friday for Future campaign to end global fossil finance, and we demonstrated kind of the effect it has on us. While the oil use was fake, the threat it poses to our future is not. And we're born into this generation, we're born into this like decaying world and told how to fix it. And then this kind of goes into what we're talking about earlier with the pessimism But there's so many times that, like my dentist, even the other day, I told them I wanted to study environmental studies, and they responded by telling me, "That's so cool. I'm really relying on your generation to save the future." But older generations can't wait for us to grow older, because there's only so much we can do while we're still in school. So I think it's critical that the older generations kind of take part in that. And that's kind of what this was. It was a group of youth sitting in front of city council, and it was like also very cold at that time. We didn't plan the day correctly, but in just demonstrating to the people who were on their streets, to the people who worked at the city council going in and out with their suitcases, the threat to our future and why it's so important to us that we would spend our Friday afternoon while it's freezing outside in t-shirts getting dumped in, I think it was pond dye and some charcoal, I don't know, with some other ingredients like that.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, I saw pictures of that, and that was really powerful. So I'm sure it must have, changed people's minds and definitely kind of resonated with them. And I wanted to ask you all about social media, because social media is definitely a huge and growing space, especially for young people, both in lots of amazing ways and lots of kind of dangerous ways. I know you were talking, Sydney, about kind of being inspired when you saw Greta Thunberg go viral. So I'd love to kind of hear from each of you about the role you think social media is kind of playing in, the climate movement, and maybe something you'd like to see more of that you feel like is kind of helping push things forward in a good way. Sydney, I'll pass it to you first.
Yeah, so I definitely think that social media has a lot of great potential to be a super powerful tool, and we've already seen that a lot. I think one of the main concerns that I've heard from parents and from some of my teachers in the past is saying, you can't trust anything you see on social media because anyone can say anything. But I definitely think that there's been a bit of a change since social media started in that statement, just because now there are people that it's literally their job to create content for social media. And a lot of times that's in education or updates about different, legislation that's being passed or with different statistics. So I think if you find the right sources, it's definitely a great way to just make environmentalism a small part of your life, even if it's not your full-time job, because now it's something like I follow a lot of people my age, but I also follow a lot of different environmental education accounts. So it's a good way to just pick up little bits and pieces of new information if I don't necessarily have the time or energy to go and sit down and read a whole 500-page book about the climate crisis or about different, the science that goes into it. So it's a good way to keep it on people's minds without forcing them to do anything that seems really daunting. I guess I don't know. I'm sure there are some negative sides to it. And again, with the misinformation and kind of finding the right sources. But I think that people recently have been doing a really good job of just considering the assets that social media brings and really kind of exacerbating those. So I don't know. I guess I can't even really think of many things that we should be doing better, even though I'm sure there are some, but just none coming to mind right now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I found climate reality through social media. So, definitely has some good parts. Lucy, what about you? What do you what role do you think social media plays into the climate movement, especially as you're kind of seeing with, your peers and kind of, especially on like college campuses?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of my work with, the Food Systems and Global Change Department as a communications intern is developing social media content and a cohesive brand. Something that's been really different about this work from my previous work is using social media as a way to connect with other experts in the field. So not necessarily, formulating messages with, layperson and just common people in mind, but actual change makers and developers and people on the front lines of influential and critical research to food systems. So I've been kind of on that end of social media recently, and it's just interesting to see how a lot of reputable organizations, individuals, scientists, and researchers use platforms such as, and it's not really so much Instagram and TikTok, it's more like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, to connect with each other, collaborate on work, and keep posted on what is going on in the food world and agrisystem landscape. What I will say that I want to see more of is, as a member of the youth, I personally use apps more like TikTok and more like Instagram, and I find them to be incredibly influential platforms. I think we all know just how easy it is to go viral almost overnight and become an overnight sensation on any of those platforms, as they are growing a greater consumer base. So what I'd say I'd like to see more of is professional organizations and people on the front lines leaning in more to those platforms that are potentially geared towards youth, potentially geared towards just the common consumer, because I see a lot of misinformation online, especially when it comes to more touchy subjects such as, consumption choices and choices we make about our diet and our food systems and global agriculture and meat production, for example. And, just about any creator can get on TikTok and post a 5-minute rant, and someone can repost it and like it and, take that to be their mantra. But I wish I saw more verified organizations, having a blue check mark, posting some really engaging content, not just the same boring content that they're aiming towards experts in the field, but content aimed towards changing the minds of consumers and really educating them so that people in my generation can be more in the know about the real science behind climate change and what is actually going on.
Yeah, that would be a game changer for sure. And I hope that that happens. I feel like I've seen some organizations kind of dipping their toes in that space, but I think it would definitely be helpful to kind of get out into more of the places where young people are, especially virtually. And Ryan, I'd love to kind of hear from you about kind of your thoughts on social media and like how it's kind of intersecting with the climate movement and the things that you're focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think social media is a double-edged sword. There's the aspect that people can really find community and find useful information that's relevant to their life through social media, especially by easing eco-anxiety. But then there's also, I feel like a lot of people, they get really anxious and stressed about the climate crisis. And then instead of offering solutions, like Lucy was saying, or trying to point out to facts, they criticize other people for their actions, which I understand where they're coming from in the term that they are super frustrated. But what we need to do is, instead of just taking that out on other people, it's internal reflection, and then also just offering solutions. Instead of saying you should change this, be like, this is what I'm doing in my life because I really care, and this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah, those personal stories are really important. We kind of work with everyone when we do our climate reality training to develop their climate story so that they can share from that perspective. And we've just found that that is one of the best ways to connect with people and have them kind of relate and get involved. And my last question for you all is, I want to ask, what is keeping you optimistic about the work you're doing? We know it can be hard, it can be a struggle, but we do want to stay optimistic about where we go with this, because clearly we are all in it because we believe that we can make change and we want to make change. And then also I'd love to hear about where you hope to take your activism. Would you like to be an elected official? Do you want to kind of be involved more in sustainability with like whatever you do for work? I'd love to hear about kind of what you think your future might be and what you're doing now. And I'll start with you, Lucy.
Yeah, so just yesterday, when I was in my perspectives on climate change colloquium, we had a really amazing speaker who works at Full Cycle, which is a sustainable investment fund. And he's, kind of gave some really hard, fast statistics that honestly gave me a lot of hope. And it's simply that we have a lot more capital to invest in climate solutions and the climate crisis that we're A, currently not investing, and B, currently not allocating correctly. So there is a lot to be done in terms of climate solutions. And we actually know what a lot of these solutions are. We know the sectors that are currently emitting the most carbon, emitting the most methane, CFCs. And we know exactly the transitions that need to be made. We just haven't seen the correct attention being put towards the sectors that are currently ravaging our environment the most and quickest. So that definitely gave me a lot of hope. And I, as I said, I'm currently concentrating in sustainable business. So I could definitely foresee myself working more on, the startup end of the environmental sphere. There's a lot to be said about the new technologies that we're going to see in the future. I'm obviously interested in the intersection between food and climate as well. So yeah, just anything within the realm of food, sustainability, and business is definitely of interest to me. So whether that means working at some sort of investment fund like Full Cycle or founding my own company, that is kind of where I see myself heading.
Amazing. Thank you, Lucy. What about you, Ryan? What kind of keeps you optimistic, and where do you hope to see your activism go in the next few years?
Yeah, I'm not exactly entirely sure what my future holds, but I know I'm going to continue my activism work because it's something that I feel like I can't live without. Something I think about a lot, and that kind of was part of my original story, is I guess this is kind of a pessimistic view, but I am kind of naturally pessimist in many ways. So it's something I'm really trying to work on. But is if the world burns and it doesn't go well, then I want to die fighting. I want to be I'm not going to sit around and watch everything go bad while I'm just sitting there doing nothing. And I feel that need, and I probably will for the rest of my life. So I do continue to study in environmental studies and continue that work in college. I'm not exactly sure where that path will lead me. And then for keeping optimistic, I think community is really important. Hearing that there are other people who experience the same things, especially connecting with Sydney was really important to me. And that's also why social media can be helpful, because sometimes you don't know who around you actually cares, and maybe nobody in your physical space has the same morals as you, but you can find people online. So I think that is something special about social media. But I found a statistic a few years ago that over 50% of Gen Z thinks that our future is doomed. And that's just the type of stuff where I just want to fight against it. But I think even though those people think it's doomed, but they're still open to listen. They still care enough that they have an open ear whenever I try to talk about it. And not everybody does, but people are open to ask me, what should I do? How can I help? And I think those people that are willing to make improvements in their personal life, in their how they feel, I think that's really the key.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And Sydney, I'll end with you. How are you staying optimistic, and where do you hope your activism takes you in the future?
Yeah, so I guess the main thing that inspires me and keeps me going is just seeing all my incredible peers doing all of this hard work alongside me. I know every time that I hop on a Youth v Oil meeting and I get to talk to the other members of the campaign, it's amazing to see how many other young people are so compelled by the cause in the same way that I am, and how they're dedicating so much of their time and so much of their mental energy to this work. And seeing that gives me a lot of faith that we're going to be able to make this happen. And I guess the way that I see myself continuing to be a part of that would either be similar to Lucy through kind of sustainable business, specifically in sustainability consultation for different arts organizations. I'm a big advocate for, with the climate crisis, not sacrificing, but finding compromises. So ways to be able to keep producing large scale entertainment and music and film without it causing so much harm to the planet. So kind of collaborating with different producing companies to make a shift in their practices. So that would be one option, or doing something more educational in the reporting field, because I do have an interest in journalism and I would love to be able to have that intersect with my passion for environmentalism.
Awesome. Well, as a journalist myself, like, we definitely need more journalists who are writing about the climate movement and kind of analyzing it. So like, come on over. We definitely need you. Well, I wanted to thank you so much, Ryan, Sydney, Lucy, for sharing your wisdom, sharing your stories. We learned so much from you tonight. And, you know, we hope we'll see you again soon. Until we do, we kind of wish you all the best in your studies and your activism, and we'll be keeping up with you. So thank you again. And thank you to everyone on the call. Hopefully we'll see a lot of you next month when we'll be forest bathing, which I am personally very excited about. But yeah, thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys are beyond inspiring. Thank you so, so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.